Previously on the Challenge All-Stars. I used my bullhorn of a voice to lead my team to victory. I broke every promise I made. I won my first ever elimination. I gave Sophia a gift. And I got pranked with a pair of dissolving swim trunks. Hello, other people. Thanks for tuning in to DVR Czar, the channel where TV rules all. And welcome to the Recap Corner! It's been kind of a hectic week, but in a mostly stupid way. I got my first COVID booster. That's the only not stupid part. Then I spent an embarrassing amount of consecutive time playing Fortnite so I could get all the color variations of a cartoon fish skin I'll never use. The Bulls-Nets game and the Bears-Cardinals game the next day were both emotionally draining, but in completely opposite ways. Also, I bit my tongue really bad, so I've lost a lot of time obsessively running the bump that formed over the back of my teeth. And in the midst of it all, I had a lot to say about Season 2, Episode 4 of the Challenge All-Stars, which might have been my favorite episode of the season so far.
This place has everything.
Okay, well, maybe not everything, because there's no nighttime party scene, but there is this shot of the cast opening fans in a single file line, which is a pretty satisfying substitute. The past few weeks, my approach to recapping the episodes has been to go through them basically beat by beat, because that was my approach when I used to write recaps on a freelance basis several years ago. But I think a discussion, well, not a discussion since I'm the only one talking, but I think a rambling, erratic monologue about this most recent episode would be better presented a little differently. Seriously, though, it's just a tiny bit different. Don't get too excited. I mean, do get excited, but not because something really cool and unexpected is about to happen. I mean, the episode's central storyline is about solidifying alliances. First, we learn about the group that's presented as having controlled the game thus far. MJ, Darrell, Kahutta, Derek, and Brad. Even though Katie, Jody, Kendall, and possibly Jonna and maybe even Jasmine are also part of this alliance, I'm going to call it the Group of Men, because it seems like the women aren't actually being consulted about gameplay decisions as much as they're just being relied on to vote how they're told. I guess some aspects of the challenge will never change. Nehemiah overhears the group of men strategizing. Normally, I'm dubious when a challenge episode shows someone eavesdropping on an important conversation, because a lot of times it's pretty obvious that the editors just inserted unrelated footage of a person standing near a door to build tension for the audience. But Nehemiah does seem to legitimately overhear the group of men. Specifically, he hears MJ urging them to target Laterrian and Nehemiah, saying that someone will eventually need to beat their big asses in the arena. I thought this was an unintentionally funny moment because I'm pretty sure MJ is bigger than both of them, since he's 6'5", a size that's very difficult to be bigger than. Realizing that people are strategizing harder than last season, and that soon it'll be too late to counter the group of men, Nehemiah rallies Laterrian, Steve, Tech, and Melinda to form a counter-alliance, which I'll be calling the Counter-Alliance. To solidify their newly formed bond, Nehemiah makes this face, which Laterrian thinks is both hilarious and fucked up.
That's fucked up.
It's not a particularly important detail, but it is established that, in large part, the alliances are determined mostly along bedroom lines. MJ, Darrell, and Kahada all share a room, as do the people in the counter alliance. Even though a bunch of the people I'm super rooting for, like Darrell, Kahada, and Katie, are aligned with the group of men, I found myself kind of cheering on the counter alliance. So often in reality competition shows, people will recognize their poor position in the game, but not do anything to remedy it. And it's not uncommon for players on the bottom of the numbers to just sort of accept it and hope that if they're further under the radar than all the other players on the bottom, then maybe they'll survive long enough for the players on top to self-implode. So given that pattern, it was honestly thrilling to watch the bottom players realize their poor position, then immediately work together to successfully defend themselves, at least for this week. But wait! Together, the group of men and the counter alliance only account for 10 of the 20 people still in the game. So where do the rest of the cast's allegiances lie? We'll talk about them later. Another central storyline, one that directly contributes to the formation of the two alliances, is the intensifying rivalry between Derek and Nehemiah. We haven't heard much about their beef since the first elimination cycle, but it's picked up early in this episode as what I assume is a drunk Derek, given this shot of him, antagonizes Nehemiah about it. What's odd about the Nehemiah-Derek rivalry is that they have multiple overlapping allies. We see Darrell acknowledge that he's cool with Nehemiah, but he also calls Derek his dog, which is apparently higher in Darrell's friendship tier list. We also know that Brad is close to Nehemiah, despite his position within the group of men alliance. So the fact that they're avidly working against each other is either a stunt for screen time, something Darrell also acknowledges as a possibility, or a personality conflict so potent, if the challenge were a rom-com, they'd totally end up together. After we see a montage of the cast physically preparing for the next mission, which includes such treats as Darrell boxing and Jasmine doing this dance, we learn that the only physicality involved in the episode's mission is clenching your muscles out of fear, because trivia's back! The Trivia Daily Challenge is a seminal part of the series and is featured in some form in the majority of seasons. Spies, Lies, and Allies skipped it, I assume because it'd be too difficult to write trivia questions that people from so many different countries who speak so many different languages would all have a fair shot of knowing the answers to. In my opinion, a classic challenge trivia event should feature all of the following: contestants falling, preferably into the water, from a high height upon answering incorrectly, TJ laughing till he can't breathe after watching people fall from a high height upon answering incorrectly, at least one contestant giving a really stupid answer. In Bright Skies, the name of this particular trivia event, we get everything but the water. Instead, players are placed on a ledge at the top of a 25-story building. TJ asks questions that have multiple answers, like who's a challenge champion or which football teams are in the SEC, which was a particularly enlightening one for me. I mean, who knew that the Securities and Exchange Commission has its own football teams? Anyone who gives a wrong answer or repeats an answer that was already said is dropped 10 stories and left to dangle mid-air. Last man and woman standing wins safety from elimination, and the first to fall are sent directly into the arena. The addition of questions with multiple correct answers is a great change to recent trivia mission formats, as is the combination of questions about pop culture, geography, and other standard categories with questions just about the challenge. But what I like most is that a right answer doesn't grant the ability to eliminate someone else from the competition, a format that's been infuriatingly used in recent main challenge seasons. A few of the contestants, specifically Darrell, Casey, and Katie, are historically terrified of heights, so naturally, TJ teases them about it. All three react differently. Darrell seems uncomfortable but resolved.
So, I know we have a few people that are a little nervous about heights. Darrell, how we doing?
I'm doing all right.
Casey's frequent quitting over heights on her original seasons is so infamous, we're shown a flashback of it happening.
What's going on? What does it look like?
It looks like you're having a temper tantrum over not making it.
Cool, I'm having a temper tantrum.
Okay, you over it?
Yeah.
All right, you disqualified.
But now she's enthusiastic about the opportunity to redeem herself. And Katie...
How's it going?
So excited.
Katie quits the mission before it begins. Let's back up a bit. When we first catch up with Katie this episode, she's talking to Tina and Janelle about her real-life friendship with Steve, as well as her overall sense of social comfortability that she feels with the cast as a whole. Then Janelle says that people can't dictate how other people play their game. At the end of the scene, Tina expresses a desire to avoid dirty gameplay, which is either proof that Tina's strategic style has drastically changed, or it's the biggest lie ever told in challenge history. Pretty much everything that's said in this conversation will be relevant throughout the rest of the episode, which means it's time for my old friends, the Four Shadows, to pay us a visit once again. Hey guys, missed you. The next time we see Katie is at the mission. She gets strapped into her harness with everyone else at the top of the building, and at first, she's even still playful about her fear like she was on land.
I'm not even gonna make eye contact with TJ today.
I wouldn't either.
But once she's standing on the ledge, and it's, real, she panics and begs to quit.
Hey, listen. I don't want to do it. I'm not gonna know a goddamn answer. Please get me off. I'm asking nicely.
Katie, come on.
Get me off of here right now. No.
Katie.
I'm refusing to do it. Get me off of here now.
One of my least favorite things a cast member can do on the challenge is spit on someone, fat shame someone, sexually harass someone, say sexist shit, say racist shit, say more racist shit, say even more racist shit. Quit a mission. Katie is someone whose presence I really enjoy on the challenge, and I'll always root for her. But this isn't the first time she's quit. It's not even the first time since All Stars started, if you count her performance during the Escape the Room mission last season. However, this time my disappointment lies more with production than it does with Katie, because it's clear very quickly that Katie is in distress and needs to be let off the ledge, which she eventually is, but not before everyone tries to convince her to change her mind, and not before several dramatic close-ups of her terrified face are used to transition us into an ad break.
Please, please, please.
15 minutes could save you 15. Now that Katie's finally been let off the platform, let's talk about some mission highlights. The first one, for me, comes thanks to the editors. After Jasmine fails to name a Britney Spears song that hadn't been named yet starts to play while she falls 10 stories. When Tina falls soon after, she tells everyone to look at her camel toe while she dangles next to the building. The final two women are Janae and Casey. Their question is to name Harry Potter books. Now, I'm just baselessly and cynically speculating, but a trivia competition show called Harry Potter Hogwarts Tournament of Houses premiered on TBS 5 days before this All-Stars episode was released. Paramount Plus is owned by Viacom CBS, which is owned by Warner Media. TBS is also owned by Warner Media. So I can't say for sure, but I think it's possible that this question was purposefully inserted into the mission as some sort of subtle advertisement for the new TBS show. Anyway, Janae says she loves Harry Potter and has read each book at least 5 times, then forgets Order of the Phoenix, which gives Casey her first ever individual mission win and gives us a satisfying redemption arc from the person it was probably least expected of. As for the last place woman, it's Katie. Because quitting. Not to be outdone by the music during the women's heat, the men's heat features a montage of players giving wrong answers set to It's Raining Men. During a question about U.S. states that touch coastline, Darrell and TJ share this exchange.
Oregon.
Sure?
Man, come on, man. Let's go.
All right.
And MJ calls New Orleans a state. It's the best kind of stupid answer because he immediately realizes how stupid it is, so I can laugh without also feeling sad, like when Nicole earnestly thought there were only 50 seconds in 5 minutes. Also, I couldn't find a good place to stick this information, but it's still important. The winner of the men's heat is Steve, and the loser is Brad. Strategizing begins immediately after the mission. Steve tells Nehemiah and Tech that his goal is to split up Brad, Darrell, and Derek, who he refers to as the 3-headed monster. Specifically, they want to target Derek, partly because he nominated Steve for elimination once before, and partly because Nehemiah nudges the plan in that direction. The only obstacles are the life shields Kahada and Jody won in last episode's elimination, since both are aligned with the 3-headed monster and would use them to protect Derek. Really though, this is only an obstacle for like a second because Nehemiah and Steve realize that they can force Kahada and Jody to burn their life shields by nominating them for elimination. That way, Kahada and Jody are forced to use their shields on themselves, and Steve and Casey can nominate whoever they want as replacements without the threat of a life shield protecting anyone. When Steve presents his plan to Casey, she's impressed and immediately on board because, as luck, or unluck, depending on which alliance you're rooting for, would have it, Casey also wants to target Derek. She says that she doesn't trust him after watching him betray multiple allies during their original challenge appearances. Now, as much as I would love to have a full encyclopedic knowledge of everything that's ever happened on the challenge, I don't. So please correct me if I'm wrong, but what betrayals is Casey referring to? The only one I can think of is at the end of the island when the men screw over Paula so Evelyn doesn't eliminate one of them. But I always think of that as Johnny Bananas and that other guy's betrayal, way more than I think of it as Derek's. Anyway, my first reaction to Steve's plan is that I'm surprised the life shield holders are even able to be nominated for elimination. But since they are, I think it's pretty ingenious. It's the sort of clever strategy that might have been viewed as cheating way back during the show's earliest seasons, and it manages to use a piece of the format, in this case, life shields, against itself. Cast members outsmarting production by finding unintended loopholes has been a core part of the challenge for a while, so I always love to see it. At the same time, I'm also wondering if Steve's plan broke the very concept of the life shield. Steve and Casey agree that eliminating Derek is their top priority. When they need to pick the other 3 nominees who aren't Derek, Steve seems overwhelmed and unsure of himself, which allows Casey to easily take control. Cohutta, Tyler, Jody, and Kendall are the initial nominations. After Cohutta and Jody use their life shields, the nominees become Tyler, Kendall, Derek, and Ayanna. They choose Tyler as a pawn since they're confident most of the women plus the entirety of the Counter Alliance will vote to save him. Kendall is nominated solely because she's one of the few women who would vote in Derek's favor, even though nominating her for elimination is the one thing Katie, Steve's only real-life friend in the game, asked him not to do. And the reason Ayanna is nominated is to protect Kendall, even though Steve sending Ayanna to the arena also doesn't help Katie. In fact, it's one of the things that directly contributes to her elimination. But aside from this one mention of it, I'm going to skip past the Steve-Katie drama, partly because Steve's choices make so little sense to me, I'm not sure how to talk about them, and partly because, like I said, Katie's about to go home in like 8 paragraphs, so really what's the point? This deliberation was by far the most strategic one we've seen, and I hope it's a sign of the sort of gameplay that we can expect moving forward. The best part is that I don't even have a guess about what, if any, consequences will come for Steve and Casey. Initially, I thought the idea to force people to burn life shields on themselves, while flashy, would probably only serve to make Steve and Casey huge targets who would likely be the next 2 eliminated, until I more closely examined and or speculated where everyone's loyalties truly lie. As promised. Like I said, during this episode, 20 people remained in the game. We know that MJ, Darrell, Cohutta, Derek, and Brad are in one alliance, the group of men. And we know that Nehemiah, Latarian, Tech, Melinda, and Steve are in another, the Counter Alliance. Based on comments throughout the episode, as well as how everyone votes during the selection, you can piece together where the other 10 people are, at least loosely aligned. And it's not looking good for the group of men. With some of their additional allies like Jody, Kendall, and Katie unable to vote, the only other person who sided with them was Janae. Tina, Jasmine, and Janelle all voted with the Counter Alliance. And if it's an indication of allegiance, then it seems like the only way Steve and Casey will face consequences from their bold plan is if one of the group of men win a mission and are able to successfully convince the other winner to nominate who they want, which didn't go so well for Darrell. Before we move on, I want to highlight a couple more things about the selection, because even if the vote itself wasn't exciting, Derek and Ayanna are voted into elimination as expected. Everything that happens around it is great. First, Casey is perfectly snide to Derek. Next, Derek throws out some cliched threatening talk. Then finally, he barks at Nehemiah.
Jesus Christ.
Nehemiah yawns in response. Also, Ayanna sleeps in her uniform again. In my opinion, it was another elimination. The best part of the segment happened before we even arrive at the arena. Nehemiah wants to show support for Brad, so he asks Janae to trim some extra hair she brought into a beard to match Brad's. Then Nehemiah does an impression of Brad while wearing the beard. Brad loves it. It's the funniest part of the episode. And considering this was the trivia episode, that's saying something. Also, I noticed when I proofread my script that instead of typing Brad, I typed Bard. Every time. The elimination is called Wait, There's More. First, players carry 1,000 pounds of sandbags up a ramp, dropping them into a chute. When all their bags have been transferred, a puzzle will reveal itself at the top of the ramp. First person to solve their puzzle wins. Overall, I just think the elimination is unimaginative, and the editing is choppy, so we never get a sense of how anyone completes their puzzle. The closest thing is Ayanna saying she feels confident in solving it because she's always putting her kids' crayons back in the box, which has nothing to do with this puzzle. But the thing I really disliked was that it was extraordinarily obvious about halfway through the episode who was going home. Both Derek and Katie had a lot more confessionals than Brad and Ayanna did, which spoiled the outcome. There's no way that Brad, who's barely been in the season at all, would be eliminated without being heavily featured in his last episode. And similarly, but also totally different, Ayanna is arguably the star of the season and would also definitely be heavily featured if she were about to be eliminated. Even if Ayanna was going to likely beat Katie anyway, at least the Brad-Derek matchup could have been suspenseful. But instead, Melinda talks about Brad and Derek's bulging muscle veins. Nehemiah tells us that if things don't go according to plan, it might be him and Derek in the arena next, which feels like a direct story pitch for All Stars 3. I realize that Brad has a big tattoo on the back of his head. Steve regrets not protecting Katie better. And on his way out, Derek finally says something funny.
At the end,
I got outsmarted by a damn hand model.
Despite the narrative that the group of men were in control of the game until this episode, the more I thought about it, the more I wondered how accurate that actually is. Derek and Jody did win the first mission, but then they used their power to get rid of Derek C., who, via his connection to John A., could have joined their alliance, or at least potentially voted with it. Then Ryan went home, who we know was aligned with Derek's half of the cast. And Sophia, who went home alongside Ryan, was close to John A., so she could have been a potential ally to them too. If the group of men was in charge, then they have no idea how to wield power. My favorite quote of the episode was Ayanna saying, "Sometimes your uniform has to be your mindset," which has got to be painted on the wall of the dance studio Ayanna owns in the challenge spinoff I didn't know I wanted, but now desperately wish was real. My least favorite quote came from Nehemiah calling himself the one who executed Derek's elimination, because he didn't execute it. Steve and Casey did. I want to thank Darrell, Tina, and Tech for making me laugh multiple times. I especially liked Darrell congratulating Jody for winning elimination by calling her Sandra Bullock.
first elimination whenever. Sandra Bullock. Seriously.
As for Tina, she has a great back and forth banter with TJ that I really hope continues. And Tech is a fantastic confessionalist. You know, when the editors bother to give him confessionals. A few things I wanted to include about the mission but couldn't fit in earlier. What are the 20 biggest restaurants in America? And how is one of them not Denny's? I really liked getting a glimpse of all the contestants' perspectives via what wrong answers they gave, which is a fun byproduct of the trivia mission that I'd never considered before. My two favorite examples were Kahutta guessing that Al Pacino was one of 44 actors to win multiple Oscars, and Darrell naming Boris Kodjoe as one of people's sexiest men alive. And that's it. All my thoughts about Season 2, Episode 4 of the Challenge All-Stars that I could figure out how to convey mostly coherently. Come back next Wednesday for another challenge recap, during which I'll be filing a missing persons report for Janelle, who I could have sworn was supposed to be on this season, but has yet to show up in it.